Hello, welcome to this video of AP Computer Science A, and in this video we are going to talk about iterations. So iterations, or they're also called loops, they're used to repeat a block of code multiple times, and using a loop can avoid code redundancy as you don't have to paste a block of code for how many times you want to repeat it. Instead, you can just use a loop and write it one time. And the two types of loops that we use in this course are for and while. So let's first look at for loops. This is how you define a for loop. This is the format, writing a for, and within you do three things. First, you define an index variable, then you define a conditional statement, and lastly, you either increment or decrement that index variable. And it is important to look at how this abbreviated format actually works step by step. So here you can see that first the index variable are defined before the loop starts to run. So it is only defined one time, not multiple times. And then after defining the variable, the loop starts to run. And at the beginning of each loop, it checks the conditional statement that you defined here. And it will continue to execute the rest of the code if that conditional statement is met. Otherwise, it will break out of the loop. And after executing this block of code that you want to repeat each time, at the end of each repetition, the index variable will change based on how you define the um, increment or decrement statement. So it happens at the very end. This is a key order to remember. It is first the index variable is defined at the beginning for once, and the conditional statement is checked in each repetition at the beginning, and the increment or decrement happens at the very end in each repetition. And for example, this loop right here runs n times, as it runs from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to n minus 1. And from 0 to n minus 1, you have n numbers, so it runs n times. Next, we also have a special type of for loop. This usually we use it in data structures. For example, here we have an array of integers, which is a data structure. We use this special for loop called the enhanced for loop by using this format, defining a variable, writing a colon, and then putting a data structure here. Doing this, in each repetition, this x is going to be assigned each element of array. So this whole loop will go through every element of array, but the value, not the index. So x here is key. It is important to remember that x is the element value of this array or of any data structure that you put here, and not the index. And then we have while loops. In a while loop, if you want it to run for a specific amount of times, then you have to define the index variable like in the for loop. We can define it here, and then within the while loop, you define your conditional statement, and then here within the bracket, you define the code that you want it to run. And it is like the for loop, the conditional statement is checked at the beginning of each repetition, continues if true, and false otherwise, it will break out of the loop. And after, if the conditional statement is met, it will continue to run this block of code that you have here. But you do have to manually increment or decrement the index variable so that your loop will eventually meet the condition to break out of the loop. Otherwise, it will result in an infinite loop. And next, we also have a special loop, which is nested loop. Here you can see that in this for loop, outer for loop right here, you have another for loop that's within that outer loop. And this runs n squared times. You can calculate that by multiplying the amount of times that the outer loop runs by the inner loop. and it is important to trace the code to actually in the test to know how many times each nested loop runs. So for example, here you can see the outer loop runs n times, and you can imagine how for each n run, you're also running n times for that n times of run. So that is a total of n squared times of repetition. So now let's look at some practice questions. So first, what is the output of the following code? We first have a for loop that goes from 10 to 0 and prints I in each iteration. And we also have a while loop that goes from 0 to 10 and prints I as well for each iteration. Then we have this block of code, and you need to calculate the value of sum after running this code. And lastly, for this question, what is the output of this nested for loop? Feel free to pause the video and solve these questions. Now I will show the answer. For the first question, the first part, you have 10, 0, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 as the output. So you can see the loop is going from 10 to 0 inclusive. So that means it runs 11 times from 10 to 0. Because at the end, when I equals to 0, it meets the conditional statement that 0 equals 0. So it will keep running and print 0 until it goes to -1. And for this while loop, you are printing only 0 to 9 because here in the conditional statement, 10 is exclusive. So when I equals to 10, it is not less than 10. So it will break out of the loop and not print 10 itself. And for this enhanced for loop, remember that x in each iteration will contain the value or the value of each element of array. So here sum is adding up all of the elements of array, and the result will be 15. And lastly, for this nested loop, although the outer loop runs 5 times from 0 to 4, you can see that in the first run when I equals to 0, this loop right here doesn't print anything. So you can see when j equals 0 and I equals 0, j is not less than 0. 0 is not less than 0. So this section right here doesn't run, it only prints an empty line. So there will be an empty line here. And for the rest 4 iterations from 1 to 4, j can be less than I. So it will run accordingly and print how many stars, like that. So for example, when I is equal to 4, when j will be less than 4, and it will print 0 to 3. So it will print 4 stars at the very end. And thank you for watching this video. If you want any AP or IB resources, please visit the vikinginitiative.com website. And if you have any questions, please join our AP CSA group chat. Ask our tutors. Thank you.